The chandeliers of Ashworth House burned bright with 1,000 flames, turning crystal and silver into shards of light that cut the air like glass. Music swelled and fell, dresses whispered over marble, and the ballroom breathed as one living thing. At the edge of it all stood Lady Arabella Thornfield, hands folded, spine straight, heart unsteady. She watched the man she had loved in silence for 3 years step forward and kneel before her dearest friend. The Duke of Ashworth was everything London admired. Tall and controlled, dark hair neatly set, a face shaped by confidence and duty. His voice carried across the sudden hush as he took Lady Caroline Ashby's hand. He spoke with care, as if every word had been weighed for propriety. He asked her to be his duchess. The room released a soft sound of wonder. Arabella felt something inside her break with quiet precision. No one heard it. No one saw it. Her smile held. Caroline accepted with grace, cheeks warm with joy. Applause followed, polite and perfect. Arabella did not move. She stood in shadow, wearing a pleasant expression she had practiced for years. She had learned how to be content without being noticed. She had learned how to make herself small. She remembered the first time she had truly seen him, 3 years ago, at the Pempton ball. He had laughed at something said by another man, and that laugh had struck her like a sudden blow. It stayed with her, lodged beneath her ribs. She remembered the garden party at Rosewood when he walked past her, speaking of estate matters, not seeing her at all. She remembered the scent of roses and his cologne, and how she breathed it in as if saving it for later. She remembered their hands brushing once at a charity event, and his polite smile, meant for anyone, meant for no one. Now he was engaged to Caroline. Beautiful Caroline, who shone wherever she stood. Arabella knew what would come next. She would help plan the wedding. She would stand beside her friend. She would watch him pledge his life to another. This was what invisible women did. They supported, they smiled, they stood aside. The announcement appeared in the morning paper 3 days later. Black ink on cream declared the match to all of London. Arabella read it at breakfast while her mother spoke of what a fine union it was. She answered softly, though her toast tasted like ash. She remembered a musical evening where the Duke had caught her eye during a poor performance, and shared a brief look of amusement before turning away. She remembered walking through Kew Gardens while he passed close by, speaking of reforms, and how she had held her breath as if stillness might keep him near. That afternoon, Caroline summoned her, glowing with happiness. She embraced Arabella, speaking quickly, joy spilling from her words. Arabella congratulated her. The words sounded real. She agreed to serve as maid of honor. Caroline noticed nothing. Arabella had guarded her secret too well. That night, alone, Arabella allowed herself 10 minutes to cry. Then she washed her face, straightened her back, and decided to bury her love so deep it might disappear. She would play her part. She would be perfect. She would endure. 3 weeks later, the Pempton ball welcomed a different kind of presence. Viscount Damien Blackwood entered like a change in weather. Conversations faltered. Fans lifted. Mothers pulled daughters closer. He was known for danger, for scandal, for beauty that promised trouble. His dark hair and smoke-colored eyes carried a reputation London both feared and craved. The feud between Blackwood and Ashworth stretched back generations. Their names repelled each other in drawing rooms. Arabella stood beside Caroline near the refreshment table when she felt a gaze settle on her. She looked up and met Blackwood's eyes. He watched her with intent interest. He crossed the room without hurry, stopping before her with a bow that was proper and not quite. He asked for an introduction. Caroline gave it stiffly. Arabella offered her hand. Blackwood lifted it to his lips a second too long. Across the room the Duke stiffened. Arabella saw his jaw tighten. For the first time in years, she felt seen, though she knew it might only be because of rivalry. Blackwood spoke with her, asking about books, about music. He mentioned seeing her at Hatchard's with a volume of poetry. She had not expected that. He had noticed her before. Confusion stirred with something sharper. She told herself it was a game. 2 days later, beneath silk tents in Lady Worthington's garden, Blackwood found her alone by the roses. The sky threatened rain. He stood close, studying her as if learning her face. He spoke plainly. He wished to court her, publicly, properly. Arabella's first instinct was refusal. She knew the whispers. She knew the danger. Then she saw the Duke across the lawn, watching them with restrained fury. Something rebellious stirred in her chest. She thought of 3 years spent unseen. She accepted. The Ton decided they understood at once. She was a tool, a battlefield. Arabella did not care. For the first time she stood in light. That night she lay awake, wondering if she had chosen freedom or folly. Either felt better than fading. At the Coventry ball, Blackwood arrived with her on his arm. The room turned. Whispers rose. He led her to the floor for the waltz. His hand rested properly at her waist. His eyes held hers with focus that shrank the room. She felt the Duke's stare like heat. Music lifted her, and she learned the danger of being seen. It was terrifying. It was alive. Blackwood murmured that she looked radiant when she stopped trying to disappear. Caroline watched with worry. Arabella felt guilt and did not retreat. She was tired of shadows. When the dance ended, Blackwood guided her into the garden. Moonlight softened marble and roses. He walked beside her in silence before speaking with a gentler voice. He told her he had noticed her long before. He spoke of her quiet intelligence, her loneliness. Arabella stopped and asked the truth. Was she a weapon or a woman? He admitted strategy had brought him to her. He admitted it had changed. He stepped closer without touching. He spoke of seeing her, quote, philosophy under her breath, of recognizing a mind she had hidden. Arabella felt exposed and understood. She spoke of loving a man who never saw her. Blackwood listened without interrupting. Days later, at a small musical gathering, the Duke confronted her in a side room. His concern sounded like command. He warned her of Blackwood. Arabella answered calmly. She asked when she had ever been under his protection. She asked whether his concern was for her or for his pride. The Duke faltered. He could not explain the storm inside him. Arabella saw confusion where certainty once lived. She left the room with hands steady and heart pounding. The weeks that followed changed her life. Blackwood took her driving. He asked her thoughts. He listened. He introduced her as someone worth hearing. She spoke freely and felt air return to her lungs. Society whispered louder. She cared less. Wedding plans continued. Arabella fulfilled her duties. Pain remained, sharper for being shared with new hope. The Duke watched her now. Distracted, restless. He began to realize what he had never seen. The truth unsettled him. At an autumn garden party, he watched Arabella laugh with Blackwood, unguarded and bright. He had never seen her so alive. Panic settled in his chest. His wedding approached. His certainty cracked. On a gray afternoon, Caroline visited Arabella. She spoke with gentle honesty. She asked the question Arabella had feared. Arabella answered the truth. Caroline listened and surprised her. She admitted her own feelings were practical, not passionate. She questioned the path they were on. The season pressed forward toward its breaking point. Love stood exposed. Rivalry sharpened. Arabella felt the weight of choice begin to settle on her shoulders. And she knew that whatever came next would change everything. The autumn season reached its height with the Countess of Peaton's grand ball, an evening spoken of weeks in advance, as though society itself sensed that something irreversible waited in the candlelit air. The ballroom glittered with crystal and expectation. Silk brushed silk, voices layered over one another in eager murmurs. And when Lord Blackwood entered with Arabella on his arm, the room shifted, as if struck by a sudden wind. She felt every eye upon her. Not the passing glance she had known all her life, but true attention, sharp and curious. Blackwood led her forward with calm assurance, as though scandal were nothing more than background noise. Arabella lifted her chin. She did not shrink. She had learned how not to. The orchestra had just finished a set when Blackwood stopped at the center of the room. His voice rose, clear and deliberate, meant to be heard. He declared that his intentions toward Lady Arabella Thornfield were serious, that he intended to approach her family with the hope of seeking her hand. Silence fell heavy and complete. Arabella felt the blood rush to her face. Shock rippled through the crowd. This was no longer flirtation, no longer rumor. This was declaration. She had no time to speak. The Duke of Ashworth moved like a storm breaking loose. He crossed the ballroom with fury written openly on his face and seized Blackwood by the coat. His voice rang with rage, sharp enough to cut. He demanded retraction. He threatened a duel. The old feud flared to life before all of London. Arabella stepped forward. Her voice did not shake. She told them both to stop. She reminded them that she was not an object, not a weapon, not a prize to be claimed or defended. She said the words plainly, and the room listened. Even the Duke released Blackwood as if burned. The scandal was complete. There would be no undoing it now. 2 days later, Blackwood asked Arabella to meet him privately. Against every rule she accepted, she needed the truth without masks. In his study, surrounded by books and quiet, he confessed what she had long suspected, that his first interest had been born of rivalry, that he had intended to wound the Duke through her. The truth hurt even as it freed her. He did not stop there. He told her when that intent had changed, when her mind and spirit had undone his plan, when strategy gave way to feeling. Arabella listened, steady and clear. Then she asked the question that mattered most. If the Duke chose her now, would Blackwood step aside? Blackwood did not answer at once. When he did, honesty shaped every word. He said he would let her go. Love, real love, could not be forced. That same night, the Duke stood awake in his study, wedding invitation in hand, rain against the windows. He finally named the truth he could no longer avoid. He loved Arabella. Not the idea of her. Not the rivalry. Her. And the knowledge came too late to be simple. Honor trapped him. Duty pressed from every side. He had chosen wrong without knowing it. At a masquerade ball weeks later, he followed Arabella into a quiet library and confessed everything. Love, regret, awakening. She listened without yielding. She told him what he had been blind to, that he saw her only once, another man had looked first, that she would never again accept being chosen second. She left him standing alone with truth burning through him. Caroline heard everything. When she released the Duke from their engagement, it was done without anger, only sadness and clarity. She told him that love demanded courage, not convenience. She told him Arabella owed him nothing. Arabella fled London the next morning. The countryside gave her silence and space. She walked familiar paths and read familiar books. Letters came from both men. She read them slowly. She learned that the choice before her was not between two loves, but between who she had been and who she had become. When she returned to London, she chose honesty. She met Blackwood first and thanked him for awakening her. She told him their story was real but not lasting. He accepted with quiet grace. She met the Duke next. She laid down her terms without apology: equality, patience, true sight, no shadows, no waiting. He agreed without argument. Winter passed in careful courtship. No rush, no spectacle. He listened, he learned, he proved. And slowly, trust took root. By spring, Arabella knew her answer. When the Duke asked her to walk beside him for life, she accepted not as a girl who had waited, but as a woman who had chosen. The past had shaped her. It would not define her. What followed would be built on sight, not blindness, on choice, not duty. Spring settled gently over London, bringing with it longer days and softer light, as though the city itself wished to offer forgiveness after a season of upheaval. Arabella moved through those days with a quiet steadiness that surprised even her. She was no longer the woman who waited at the edges of rooms, nor was she the reckless figure who had stepped into scandal simply to feel alive. She had become something else entirely, someone awake. The Duke of Ashworth did not rush her. That alone marked the deepest change in him. He came when invited. He listened more than he spoke. He asked questions and accepted silence when she offered it instead of answers. He no longer tried to dazzle her with position or wealth. Instead, he showed her attention, Real attention, the kind that lingered. They spoke often of books, of ideas, of the world beyond ballrooms and titles. He asked her opinion on matters he once would have decided alone. When she spoke of her charitable interests, he did not smile politely and move on. He acted. Quietly, without credit, she noticed. Still, trust did not come easily. Some nights, Arabella lay awake, remembering the years she had spent unseen, wondering whether this new devotion would fade once the novelty passed. She did not hide these doubts from him. When she voiced them, he did not defend himself with words. He accepted them as consequence. He told her he would spend however long it took proving himself. Society watched with fascination. Whispers followed them wherever they went. Some said she had ruined him before saving him. Others claimed he had simply returned to what was always expected. Arabella learned not to care. She had lived too long by other people's measures. Caroline remained close. Their friendship, once strained by silence, grew stronger through truth. Caroline spoke openly of her relief at escaping a marriage built on suitability rather than love. She had found her own happiness now, quieter and warmer than ducal grandeur ever promised. There was no bitterness between them, only understanding. Lord Blackwood left London for a time. When he returned months later, the sharp edge of scandal had softened into something else. He greeted Arabella with genuine warmth and no regret. They spoke briefly, kindly, and parted with the ease of people who knew their chapter had been necessary, but not final. The Duke proposed on an evening washed in pale gold, not in a crowded room, not before an audience, but in the gardens of his estate. He did not kneel. He stood before her and spoke plainly. He told her he had learned what it meant to truly see another person. He told her she had changed him by refusing to accept less than she deserved. Arabella listened. Then she told him what she required: a partnership, a voice, space to remain herself. She would not disappear into his life. She would walk beside him. He agreed without hesitation. Their wedding was held in early summer. No excess. No spectacle. Joy. Simple and full. Caroline stood beside her, smiling freely. Blackwood attended, dignified and distant, his presence a quiet acknowledgment of all that had led them here. When Arabella walked into the church, she did not feel like a girl rescued or chosen at last. She felt like a woman stepping into a life she had claimed. Years later, when London gathered again beneath bright chandeliers and familiar music, some remembered another night long ago, a quiet woman at the edge of a ballroom. Invisible, forgotten. They watched now as the Duchess of Ashworth moved through the room with calm confidence, her husband's gaze never leaving her for long. They saw how he listened when she spoke, how he turned toward her instinctively, as though she were the center of his world. Arabella knew the truth. Love had not saved her. Seeing herself had. And from that knowing, everything else had followed.